Hello everybody, this is Steven from RaddConcept, RC Innovations. I just put a little short video together of the Ferris wheel. It was pretty much a build montage of all the different clips I took and everything. There's a bunch of audio over a lot of the clips, so I just had to turn off all the audio on there, and I figured I might as well just voice over, explain a lot of it, and show you how it actually all goes together. There's actually a bunch of different pictures and videos. They're not all exactly in the build order, but they're roughly close. And I actually had to skip around into different portions of the build in order to complete it, as I didn't have stuff like that at the time. So I kind of just built it as what I could do. And here I'm just showing the A-frame that supports the wheel and how it actually folds up. I actually had to do a bit of edit work to the file to fix how it folded up. That way it kind of give it the max strength and everything, using actuator and everything. The geometry and everything matters a lot on how much stress you're putting on the actuator. Here I'm just kind of showing how the spokes link all the way around the main wheel, and the bearings, you can see it's got pretty good size bearings for what it is. It was actually pretty hard coming up with the design of how to print all this, make it. Figuring it out was kind of the fun part, though. You can see how only one of them is actually attached to the wheel. The rest of them roll around it. It actually slides in a groove on each side. And then there is pinholes where you can pin them off, which is supposed to be done in the very end. But here I've got it set up where it's just got the main rod through there, holding it up for now. You can see how the spokes actually hang. It's how they hang from the main arch. In this here video, I just kind of have it set up on the stand. They don't have no axles or nothing under there, you can see. I'm just kind of testing out the wheel to make sure everything was gonna work as I was hoping so. And then I test out the arch, lifting it up just by hand. And this is like one of the very first times I realized how much weight is underneath of it, or how much weight it's actually trying to lift up. There's quite a bit with all the spokes and everything, and there's still center T-braces and stuff that hang the gondolas, and once the lights and all that was on there, it makes a big difference in the weight that it's actually lifting than when it's fully put together. Here I actually got a few different spokes on there than what I end up with. I end up changing a bunch of yellows to reds because I ran out of the same shade of yellow, so I didn't want to start printing with a whole different shade of yellow. But it actually lifts up and everything really good. I'm figuring out how close it is to the insides, and usually your spokes will be pulled up when you go to put the arch away, put it down. Usually those spokes are held up by a winch or some sort of cable. which I later end up making a bunch of stuff like that to help with the process of setting it up. This trailer, taking it to like a meet or something like that would be the ultimate place for something like this here. And I actually put in the design a lot of different features that would take up time when you're at the meet, and setting it up and just bringing the amusement to it. People would see you sitting there, and every so often you'd have a new piece on there, and just the continuous wonder of what it is you're actually setting up. And once you get to the final last piece, it's all worth it, just to see it go round and round, as you'll find out in the video. So here you can see the center T-brace that actually holds the gondola, and just when it's folding away, it stores like that. You pull down the centerpiece, and then it just hangs down, and the gondola goes on there with a pin. I think here I just got like the very first T-brace in there. I'm kind of checking how everything goes together, and then here's the very first accident. Just like a real one, you gotta watch how you assemble it, and assembled according to weight and everything. And once I take the pins out of this, I totally forget, and it all just came crashing down right there. I'm lucky I didn't break spokes and stuff. I learned from that point there, I learned that I needed to hold on to it a lot better. This is actually the first roll, and it's hardly 15% together right there. There should be a lot of side braces, all sorts of stuff, but I was just in a rush and I wanted to see it turn. And during the setup process, I made this little jack, and it helps to lift the gondolas from the sliding rails that are on the deck of the trailer up to hook into the Ferris wheel. And you can see the jack right here. All this here design I came across on the internet, just watching videos and stuff, and I seen this one post that said this design would not work. It does not work. It's supposedly not possible. And I seen it in my head that it would work, and I was looking for a solution to the problem, which you can see how I fixed it by using that design. And I had to change it just slightly, but the design is still the same. There really is no difference. But it does work, that's for sure. It's actually pretty cool to sit there and tinker with. You can see how it has a lock on the left side here, and on the right side I am using the jack handle just as you would excuse me, an original jack. And it actually has a plate that lifts up to the bottom of the gondola. When it sets down, it sets between the rails perfect, and the gondola can roll off on its wheels. The gondola sets down onto the two rails you see in the center there. Once it's up over the top of that there jack, though, you can just lift it up using the jack handle, and then it pushes it right up to where the pin goes in, and you just set your pin in there. And then when you push the jack handle all the way forward, you can see I'm showing you right here how when you push it forward all the way, the release pin comes out, and that allows the jack to just drop. And in some cases it's a little sticky because it hasn't been used all that much, but I go in there and just make it a little bit looser. It starts to work really good in the end there. Come on, Dexter, you can't be barking. This is actually one of the very first times that I'm putting all the rim irons in and fitting the pins. There's 2 pins for each rim iron, which have to be fit at the ends of them. Once you get them going through the very first time, they start fitting in there real easy. Here's the wind side brace. It took a special little design, which is like a ball end connector that slides in a fork, which holds it up in that spot. But it has to be able to swing because it has to fold up, and it's about 3-4 portions to come apart, shorten up for transport. You can see the bottom has the jack. That little jack allows you to adjust the tension side to side, which those actually come in really handy, and I don't think the design would have been possible if I wouldn't have incorporated those and the actual trailer jacks. This was the very first servo actuated, setting the arch down under the weight, and actually the servos that I have on it are just a little bit too weak. I end up changing them 2 different times after this here, and you can see at the end it kind of just starts to fall into place because it was just way too much weight on it. But all the plastic and everything held up really good. None of that there has ever actually given me a problem. I made sure to make the design really thick for portions that were going to be under stress. That's why the actual original Ferris wheel that this is modeled after has 10 gondolas, and I had to do away with 2 of them and make 2 less spokes than the original, just so that I could go a little bit thicker with my spokes and the rest of the design pretty much. And once I was done with the trailer length and everything, it would have actually been really hard to fit all of the gondolas on the deck once it was folded up as you see it right now. They just would have been really, really tight. And getting rid of 2 of them actually made it a lot more comfortable. You can kind of see a lot better how it folds up, and the top umbrellas, they make a stack of themselves when they're on the deck, so I had to keep that in mind too. You can see the rims right there that I was just getting ready to start putting those there on. I think I've got about 4 of the center T-braces that hang the gondolas on it right now. They're not all. And here I'll start to work on the trailer jacks. There's 4 screws on each side that actually hold each trailer jack on. It is one piece, and there's about 3 different pieces to the jacks themselves. There's a center, and then there's the bottom jack part, and then there's the housing of the jacks, which holds everything up from the bottom. And you can see I start to show how the jacks go down and go up by using the special tool that I built. This here tool, once I had everything stacked on the deck, I realized that this one here was just a little bit short if everything was stacked in your way. So during a little bit later in the build, I end up making a longer one, and it actually comes in handy for a few different functions. You can see the screw jacks, you just turn them from the top and they slowly lift the trailer. I've done them individually though, so that way you could kind of level the trailer from left and right with them, and it does work really good. The trailer jacks actually are used to set the front and the back stabilizer bars on the trailer. You lift the front of the trailer, and then you lift it off the truck, and then you lower it way down, and you set the very back stabilizers that are behind the axle, because those go up when the front of the trailer goes down. So once those are down, you lift the front of the trailer, and then you lift it high enough so you can set the front stabilizers, and then you set it down on the stabilizer arms, which are perfectly level. It helps it be perfectly level. And then you kind of want to keep some stress on the trailer jacks. I actually use everything. I make sure they're all still set and down. Here I'm actually working on it, so I have it set up over a table where I can get to the underside of it a lot easier. But you can see it's actually level sitting on the stabilizer jacks there. And I have a resin tabletop, so the resin cured to perfectly level. But the trailer jacks, those those are what made it possible to be able to set all the stabilizers. And once all the stabilizers and everything are down and the tires are on and everything's touching the ground, it is in spot. Stabilizers and the wind braces, and then you got the skirting too, actually, that has a bunch of stabilizer feet. And skirting is part of the stability of the whole Ferris wheel. I can tell you this, whenever I go to a carnival or even standing around any Ferris wheel, especially ones that are designed in the very same fashion that this one here is, there's a bunch of things I'll be looking at for safety. Since I went across designing this here and everything, I learned a whole bunch of different things that could actually make a difference in how safe you feel on that ride. You can see it's actually really level. It looks real good right there. And that's sitting on all the stabilizers. And here's one of the very first times that I lifted it up with the actuators. These are new actuators, but I end up changing them after. I go from, these are 120N actuators, and I go to 150 because just 120 was slightly underpowered for it and kind of slow. So you can see it's lifting it. It's just kind of slow for, I mean, you don't want to go real fast, but, and you can see how all the spokes remain on the deck. A lot of the weight remains on the deck. So once everything's all put together and those spokes are picking all the weight up with it, it actually is a lot more strain on the actuators. So I ended up changing those again. I went to a 150, and during the end of the video you'll see there's a time when I lift it up, it just does a lot better. And you can see all 8 spokes and how they just hang out when the wheel is being assembled. I'm starting to work on some of the skirting here. See, I had to jump around here and there because I didn't actually have all the parts printed and stuff that I needed at the time to keep going for certain areas. So you can see I'm doing the skirting and the cab stand, operator stand, and all the skirting and the operator stand, all that there, it folds up in a fashion on the side of it, of the trailer, so that it can just be real fast assemble. And but I have a few things that I want to change about the stabilizer feet. Still have yet to do some of that there. But you can see how it's all, pretty much every bit of it has hinges built into the edges of it. There's a top deck and then a side. There's a whole side to it with skirting and then stairs and a ramp. And then it has all the rails that actually go across the top too. Here I'm just kind of showing how this here goes together. And the way that I made this is I made the hinge work with a regular 1.75 millimeter filament. So really all you have to do is, I learned that it's best to twist the filament and tear it off by twisting it, because it actually rounds over all the edges, and that allows it to push in through the hinge pieces a lot easier than if you were to just use like some snippers and cut it, because those snippers pinch it and they cause just the tiniest little bit of compression in the filament where it makes it thicker and it doesn't want to slide through the hinge as well. And I actually had to, as you can see, I had to take it off, put it on there, take it off, put it on there. I had to probably go over these steps a few times, working a little bit of play through the hinge, because I didn't want to force them in there and then not be able to hinge the piece because they were just real tight and everything. Overall they end up working really good. And there's stabilizer bars. I just put one in. Those actually lock some of the side skirting together to help build the whole I guess, stage of how you would say for... Yeah, the skirting actually has one spot where you have to either glue it together, or what I do is I use the 3D pen and I plasti weld it pretty much. And like there's a pretty specific technique that you have to do, just by building heat up and going real slow while you're filling plastic into, is the same as a weld. You want to take your pieces and notch in like a V groove or something, to where you have a groove that you're filling, instead of just trying to overlay and then grinding that off. Or is in the same fashion, I fill that groove and then I use a Dremel and I smooth it over so that it just it looks perfectly smooth. And I actually have a lot of things that I've plasti welded together with the very same filament, and it is held together like really good. I have a full 3D printed windshield visor on my mini truck that I've had it on there for almost a year and a half now, and it's went through all types of weather you can think of. It's about 8 parts all the way across, but nothing but 3D printed, plasti welded together. As you can see, I got the cab all slid over on the stand and everything, and working on the skirting still, trying to put the ramp and everything together. You can see how the posts hold all the side skirting together there. There's the one spot that has to be plasti welded. And then you have some stairs that go right there at the end. A railing. That one there will have to be plasti welded to the other, or glued. I think it's the best way to plasti weld it though. And you could pick up 3D pens for like $25–30. And then really any type of plastic PET G. I make all of this out of PET G. There is not any other type of material here. It is all PET G. So if you picked up any color PET G, you would be able to fill and plasti weld any bit of the work that I do with these here. You can see the tractor is just slightly sitting under there. It fits perfect. All of it worked out great. And then you have the rim irons stored away underneath the trailer. I don't think I actually have the axles and tires on it just yet. I'm still putting all of it onto the trailer, fitting it together. You can see that wind brace in there. That thing is just kind of just smushed in there. It's not actually smushed in there though. It fits perfect. And the RaddConcept smoking flame and stacks. I pretty much have lighting up exhaust on every truck I've ever done. Yeah, the Ferris wheel turned out really cool how it stores away though and everything. I've still got a few things that I want to make to help when it's stored away, just make it look a lot better. And the very top spoke likes to raise up because all the weight is actually just sitting down on it. The very top spoke is the one that is attached to the main center wheel. So when all the arch sets down on it, it kind of wants to flip the top spoke upward. So I'm gonna make like a cradle that cradles all of the spokes and holds them still until you lift it up and take it off. You can see everything is kind of stacked on the deck there. I got the Dreamcatcher sign on there. I actually went with the Dreamcatcher name because it kind of just reminded me of a dream catcher, and I was using more black lights and stuff like that, so I figured it would kind of fit it a lot better. And the actuators, when those are actually lifted and the whole arch is up and everything, there's 2 plates that go in the holes that the actuators create to fold up. So it just kind of fills the deck, makes it feel a lot more complete. And the cab stand back there, the stand itself is, it's got skirting on 3 sides, so it's got hinges on 3 sides, and I had to come up with a specific design of how it would actually fold up. And it's kind of cool how I made the hinges in different layers, and it actually folds up onto the side of the trailer perfectly. And you got some different shackles and stuff that help you hold all the skirting up into a travel position. This truck here I've actually had for probably a good 10 years. It was one of my very first trucks that I actually started building into. I picked it up pretty cheap actually. I had to put a bunch of work into it. I put the smokestacks and stuff on the back, and lights and all that, GT power, engine, sound card, and a bunch of other stuff. It actually has a lot of videos and stuff. I went with, you can see the skull in 1891. And 1891 is actually the year that Scania started producing trucks and stuff like that. So that number always stuck with me. Here you can see I'm using the 3D pen, and I'm getting that one spot there. I've already got the groove cut into it, so I'm filling that groove, and then I'm sure later on you'll be able to spot that 3D weld. I don't think I actually ever smoothed it over. I think I just decided to leave it like that. Sometimes it just gives good character. And I've done a lot of 3D welding with the 3D pens. I make all my bodies and stuff like that, RC car bodies, and I'm pretty good at laying what would represent as a bead as if you were welding. It kind of turns out real cool. You just got to take the time, build the heat, and slowly fill while controlling the speed of the fill. I mean, you can, if you go too fast, you don't actually build up enough heat, and in the same sense as welding, you're not getting a deep enough weld. It's pretty much like laying over the outside of the material. So you want to go slow, make sure you heat up your part real good. It's actually better if you use a hot room and you heat the whole thing and just let it sit into a 80-degree temperature or something like that, 90-degree temperature. The warmer your room is, the better. If you're trying to do something in the cold, like a 50-degree room or something like that, and most of the time you're going to have a hard time getting layers to joint together. You see all the rim irons, and I got some rubber bands holding all the skirting up. This is just like one of the very first tests of putting the skirting up there and making sure it folded up real nice. And there was a few edits that I had to make because I didn't actually incorporate like where the posts and stuff came out of the bottom of the skirting, and all of that kind of held it up just a little bit. So as I was building this very first one, I went back into my files and I edited the parts that needed to be tinkered with a little bit, and made sure all that would be good to go. You could see the 3 LEDs on the rear for each side. So you'd have a blinker and a running light and a braking light. And on one side you have to remove all of the rails. You see what I can leave one of them in there, but all the rest of them have to be removed just to transport. And all the rails and stuff actually go inside of the cab, the operator cab, when it's stored away. The stabilizer feet go underneath of the cab, and the rails go inside of it. You can see the suspension, how I built it up here. There's actually suspension towers, and then you have suspension arms, and then the axle is mounted to each arm, and then you have spring mounts, and then there's a bolt that everything slides on, and the very bottom has a nylon lock nut on each side, and you can actually change the tension and get different springs. There's a lot of room for adjustment in the suspension. You can see you can actually lower the trailer by tightening that lock nut, and it builds more tension in the spring as well. But all of that can be edited. You can get longer bolts. Yeah, it's actually the same for the front and the rear axle. There's just a center tower brace that goes across, and 2 towers that hold all of that there together. and all that mounts to the trailer chassis. And these actually are 110mm axles. If you go any wider than that, they are sticking out slightly, and I messed up by getting 140mm axles and stuff like that and trying them out, so I ended up having to put the axles on a lot later than I originally would like to. The axles came in the very last. I was sitting here with the trailer wishing I could hook it up to my truck, and I couldn't even put it on the truck yet because I didn't have no axles. I went and I put a few things on just to test it out and see how it would look and everything, but never actually got the axles on until this here is the original, or the final axles here. But as you see, I had a lot done up until this point. And I got the trailer sitting on all the stabilizers just across a stand that I have so that I could easily get up underneath of it. Here I start putting on, there's a shackle, and I put the wind brace on down onto the skirting. You can see on the main face where all the action happens, where the people walk up the deck and then they come back and get down off of it, the wind brace actually connects up to the top of that skirting, so the stability of the skirting and the stabilizer feet and all that have to be you have to have a pretty good setup in between there to have all of that there. And I usually would look for a level surface here. This really isn't something you'd want to take out onto the dirt and try to set it up onto the dirt, because you'd have a lot of uneven parts that are going to try to set it off. And I mean, the trailer jacks actually make a huge difference when you have it completely set up and you move them just slightly. It moves the whole wheel in between the arch like drastically. I grabbed some of the gondolas here and start sliding them back and forth on the rails, just kind of show you how they're all moving around. And we got the cab, operator cab slid out. A bunch of the umbrellas that go over the top of all the gondolas. Here I got most of the rails on the back. I think there's a rail there and a rail real close to the servo. Those were the very last rails I ended up printed, which were practically the very last parts to the whole thing. I pretty much had everything else done. Had to go after those rails last. And you can see the wind brace. It's actually the same thing on both sides, just the back side would go all the way down to the ground. And once you have it completely set up, those two wind braces, they made a huge difference. A huge difference in the movement. And I guess you do have to set up the wheel when you're almost at a final stage. You have to worry about how it's tracking, and those wind braces also help you to move it back and forth through the arch just a slightly little bit, just to help the tracking. That way you're clearing the insides. And you can see here I'm using the multi-tool. I changed it up a little bit and I added like a winch part so that you could pull the spokes back, and then the spokes actually just slipped out on me and they all fell in. So I have a little bit of working out that I was still doing there. But you can see I made it to where when you push it in, it locks and it holds the tension of the winch line, and the winch line is wrapped out all the way to the last spoke. So I'm pulling all of the spokes back under tension, and then I'll push that rod in and it locks it into a square lock where you can pull it out and it actually lets it spin free, but it holds it in place. It can't actually move out of its spot. This is actually the very first version of that multi-tool. I end up changing it another time after this, just to kind of make it even a little easier. See, in this position I have the first rim iron in, which is connecting 2 spokes, and then I pulled all of the other rim irons back, which would allow me to put in the second rim iron, or I pulled all of the spokes back, which would allow me to put in the second rim iron set. But I'm actually moving the first spoke set around, kind of looking at the adjustments and stuff like that. Still learning how it all goes together. At this point, I mean, I'm still learning. And one of the final edits I make of this tool is just a center piece that allows the winch line to coil around it, and it keeps the multi-tool from rolling back out of the lock. Just made it a little bit more safer. Here I have the wheel all, well, I think it's like 25-30% assembled. I don't even think I had all the rim irons on there. Maybe I did. Yeah, I got all the rim irons on there, and I'm just kind of messing around, spinning everything. It was the very first time that I had pretty much the wheel assembled. It's not complete because it doesn't have the electric commutator rings or commutator rings on there. Those are what transfer the electric power to the center of the wheel without twisting wires. Somehow the lights and all of that have to be powered, but it has to be able to continuously spin, or you're going to have wires that start to rip out. And at this point I'm just kind of having fun with the wheel because it was the very first time I actually got to start spinning it, and I get over my head and I start spinning it about 100 miles per hour. But it just shows those bearings that I put in there, they sure got a good workout. And the overall design, how it proves it works out real good actually. And you can see I don't actually have the stabilizers on there and everything. It's not actually completely set up. I start tinkering around with it and spinning it real fast. And it kind of makes a scary Ferris wheel ride. I sure would hate to be on there and that thing's a zooming though. Ferris wheel though, because you have the original rings that make the Ferris wheel, and then you have the shape that the gondolas continuously make, which is hanging down below, over the top and below. So it kind of makes an awkward oval, but once you're seeing the whole thing go around, and you have to take in consideration like the weight and the mass that's continuously going around with it. At first I actually just put it all together, and I don't actually have all the pins in the center of the Ferris wheel for the spokes, so it actually has a lot of movement. Like each spoke would move back and forth just slightly, millimeters, and there's a mass of the wheel that it's just not perfectly balanced, but every so often it would make a clicking because the mass of the wheel just would be thrown left to right. You would tell the shift in the wheel. But once you have the whole wheel together, all the assemblies complete in the trailer, and you have the pins in there and everything, it's locked tight. The wheel is perfectly centered through its weight and all the gondolas. I mean, just the tiniest little screw, little 3mm screw put on top of one of those umbrellas on the gondola wheel will make it spin all the way down and come to the bottom, because it just is so balanced in the weight. And as this is going up, after you get your first set of rim irons in, you actually start to use the motors which drive the wheel, the whole Ferris wheel around. you use those motors to hold the very first set of spokes up, and then you put in your next set of rim irons that connect to your next set of spokes, and then you use the electric motors to run it up higher and higher. And as you get higher and more spokes in, the weight actually gets really off balance, and then it starts to come back to a balance point. And even in real life, as they get those spokes up to that half point and then it starts to come back down towards the ground, that's a really dangerous point. And if it were to slip down in just certain circumstances, there could be people hurt or people killed. And right here is where I start to get over my head and I start spinning it real fast, and I actually end up making one green gondola spin around a whole 360. And you can see if you was in that, you'd probably went flying.
That scary Ferris wheel accident in Tennessee. 3 young girls rushed to the hospital after their basket flipped.
We were just cruising. You can see I kind of get back a little bit here and I show the drive motors and the setup that I've chosen to run the drive motors, which is 2 individual N20 motors. It's just a little gear reduction unit, and you can actually I run these off of a 3.7 volt lithium battery, and it spins it perfect. It's the perfect speed, and I actually end up wiring everything into the operator cab and have a special little control box on the deck of the trailer where you can run to and flip the switches to turn the wheel off, or the lights, the stereo. I end up putting a Bluetooth stereo on it. And in the end, I think this thing ended up with 600 lights or something. 600 LED lights, black lights, which give it a real good look at night because it kind of makes all the different fluorescent colors come out. Here I'm trying to show how the trailer jacks from left and right, there's a slight adjustment would adjust, or it would shift the wheel inside that arch just enough to rub, or it would push it way far away from it. So those trailer jacks came in perfect. Like, I knew I was going to need all these types of adjustments somehow. I just didn't quite know exactly what was going to cause the reaction that I was going to need. But I mean, it's all built into the original design. Just I didn't know all of this at the time. When I started building this here, I learned a lot. I watched many videos on YouTube just to figure out exactly how these went together. And it is really close to the originals. I actually would have to thank Big Round Wheel Amusements, because they talked to me for weeks on end, giving me different ideas and stuff, and measurements and information I needed just to see the ending result of what I could possibly do, because I had to make changes. You couldn't print out from a 3D printer identically what they would want to see, and I know that's what they wanted to see, was it be identical, but I had to do 8 spokes instead of 10, and there's just certain things that I had to do for making it 3D printed to come up with the strength and things that it would be missing if I were to stick with the original thicknesses and what they would be in 1/14 scale. So you can see the drive motor. Each drive motor is kind of it's tensioned against the wheel with the spring, and then you can actually slide the motor in and out, and the drive wheel comes off just to come out of, so you remove it out of the way. And I'm actually showing the
umbrellas here, how they just sit on the top. They actually do have a pin that can go through them, but it's not really important to put that on there, being it's just a little model. I mean, it's actually a big model. It stands 5 foot nearly. 4.5 feet long. Taking up my whole countertop, you can see, next to a Scania. I think that's an R470 Scania. I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've actually looked into all the information on the Scania truck. I actually have a lot of trucks sitting in there, so it's kind of hard to keep up with them all. But I felt the Scania would fit this here trailer the best this time. And the Scania has a bunch of rear lights that are made for lighting up the trailer and stuff like that, so it actually worked out really good with the Scania. And it has blue underglow, so you can see the stabilizer foot. For the video here, I've just got it posted up right there, and it's holding it steady, but it actually should have the jack screw on the bottom where it's able to be adjusted to build tension or release a little tension. And I actually do end up making the windows and all, and the gondola parts that you can see through there. There's supposed to be a clear filament, but it doesn't actually turn out as clear as a person would want. But it still gives and represents the same. I like how it allows the light to come through. And with the rails and stuff like that hidden away inside the operator cab, I kind of like the hidden window. Like it's tinted a bit, which originally wouldn't, because that's a safety hazard. They actually have all them windows and stuff so that they could see up and see the gondolas going up over their heads and make sure little kids aren't hanging out the side. You know how they would love to do it.
But for others on the ride, jumping wasn't an option.
There you can see on the back, good view. I actually keep the original bumper that I've done from one of the previous trailers that I've released. I kept that just to do a remembrance, kinda. And then I've done some new mud flaps for 2024, but I don't actually have them on this trailer just yet here. In the end, you can see them. And I'm kind of showing off the cab slides and stuff here. Those black mounts you can see down, those are the cab slides. It allows the cab to slide back over the trailer, holds them in place for transporting it. I've actually got to replace those cab slides. They're a little bit too wide, and the original one allows the gondolas to roll all the way back to the back, just giving you a little bit extra space for when you're setting up. But the gondolas won't roll past those black mounts that are at the back. They're just a little bit too wide. So I'm going to change that there. I'll reprint those one day. And here I'm kind of showing off the plates. I don't think I've actually got the plates in there yet. I'm just telling about the deck plates and the seats that go in the gondolas. There's 2 seats for each gondola. They're not in there yet. I've got to print all those still. Then you got the drive motor. The old drive wheels that were on there, they just weren't big enough, so I wanted to do a lot bigger drive wheel that had a lot more grip to it. And I did do a 2-part drive wheel where the inside, which connects to the motor, is PET-G, and the outside, which grips around the center wheel, is actually TPU, which is a really malleable rubberish plastic that prints out, and you have to print it a lot slower because it just can't force it through the printer like it does the original tensile strength, like as PET-G. So that stuff there, I actually printed out those are the very first parts that I ever printed in TPU, and they turned out really good. They do allow a bit more grip, but I don't think it actually mattered. I think the originals would have still worked out great. Once the wheel is set up, it literally takes nothing to turn the wheel. You can spin the wheel just slightly, and it will just sit there and spin for 20 minutes. If this Ferris wheel didn't have a motor that was tensioned against the wheel, it would just constantly want to sit there and spin against the wind and all sorts of different factors. And here I'm kind of showing the camera sideways, but you actually can see the motors and how they slide back and forth a little better. And you can see the gondolas, how they go through there and slide through everything. It is extremely tight. So just imagine how everything was zooming past all those motors, and when I was just sitting there having fun flinging those back and forth. I'm surprised I didn't actually end up breaking something. I didn't have no stabilizers or nothing. So I'm still working on a few improvements to it. One of them being the spoke ends and how the spoke ends connect on each end. I want to make them a more removable portion so that it's not such a big piece that has to be printed. Just say, just in case one of them broke, they could be easily replaced and not have to replace such a big part, say in half of the spoke. But I actually have already done the inside portions of the spoke, but I didn't do the ends, which are at the rim iron, the very end that create the circle. Those are the main ones that I want to do next. And once I change those there, I think it'll make a big difference in just how everything sets down and everything, how it folds up on the trailer. Yeah, I'm just kind of showing the rails, how the rails lift in and out of there. And front stabilizers set with a pin through the front of the trailer. You just pull the pin out and then lift them, put them down, set the pin in. Once the trailer sits down on it, it locks it all into place. It can't actually move if there's any pressure on it. Over the top of the jacks, you can see those two jack screws a lot better there. They're red. The tops of them are red there. They're hidden by those actuators. And just kind of showing some of the trailer jacks here and storage underneath. It's actually just a few rods that go across underneath that hold all of the rim irons underneath when they're stored away. There's 18 rim irons, or no, there's 16 rim irons to the whole Ferris wheel. So there would be 8 rim irons on each side of the trailer. Before, when you were setting up the skirting, before you were to pull the skirting all out, you would have to remove the rim irons. Otherwise, they'd get locked underneath the trailer and the skirting, and you wouldn't really be able to get them out very easy. And right there, you can see the rods that are just going across that hold the rim irons. And those actually have a special piece that is mounted into the center. And in between them is where the set of stairs is held. The stairs store away underneath there, in between all of the rim irons. I think this is like 320 parts total to complete this whole Ferris wheel. Now, I don't think that actually, yeah, I know it doesn't. The 320 parts isn't including all of the 3D printed pins that I have made here. So there's probably a good 30 pins. Yeah, there's probably a good 30 pins or so that hold everything together. So I'm actually doing some leveling to the trailer here. Just kind of checking over it again. Make sure all the stabilizers and everything are doing exactly what I was hoping. And I got all the wind braces and everything holding it steady. Set up just as if it were 100%. Just missing a few pieces that I haven't been able to get printed yet. It's pretty much at this point I started thinking about them lights. That's why I'm touching the side, I think. Caressing it. I love lights. LED lights. Just things flashing. That's why I'm so good at it, actually. I'm pretty good at doing a really nice wiring job. I try to take all of that in mind before I make designs and build semi-trucks. And just like this trailer, it has wire tunnels all the way down the center, all the way up the arches, all the way around the spokes, things like that, just to help me out when I'm going to hook up all the lights through it. So as I say, I think this thing ends up with 600 some LED lights on it. Takes a lot of wire to run through it all. And you can see the safety pin I pulled there. Those lock the arch so that you just can't drop it. Which I've dropped it, I think, a few times. I'm glad I took in consideration the thickness for being 3D printed, because I've failed a few times and things have come clanking down. If they weren't strength thought of, I probably would have had a lot of broken parts already. And see, through these videos I actually had a lot of background noise. You see TVs on and all sorts of different, but there was a lot of build time. Here I'm actually getting ready to throw some wiring up that arch through the wire tunnels and through the spokes and stuff like that. The commutator rings, which supply the power through to the center of the ring, or through the center of the wheel. There's actually a plus on one side and then a minus on the other side. So I run one wire up through one side of the arch and another wire through the other side, and later on you'll see how those wires connect to some metal washers, and I got a spring and some other wires that are spring loaded that push against the washer on the side, which allows the continuity to continue through into the center of the wheel. And then there's some locking pins that hold all of this in place so that the whole center of the wheel is actually locked together. Here I start pushing wire down through the main A arch frame, Because I designed it with wire tunnels so that you could wire the motors and the lights and all that to where it would be hidden and you wouldn't have a bunch of wires out in your face, like kind of ruining the look of it. And I mean, seeing some of the wires is good. It brings the realistic and the functionality to the vision. But if you start seeing wires running all the way around the spokes and stuff like that, it becomes a nuisance. And really your eye wants to focus more in on all of that. And so I wanted to keep all of that to a minimum by building in the wire tunnels. And I think the left side, which I'm working on right now, ended up being the tightest wire tunnel. I was able to get everything through there decently. Like, it really didn't take a fight, but the left side was by far harder because I ran lights up to the sign, which is on the front. They actually only have a sign on the front that says the name and stuff, and the sign on the back, I believe, was it had like some different things that it said, or they could change it up too. On this design, I'm probably only going to be doing one sign, but you can put two signs on it. It has the very same mount on the front that it has the very same mount on the back that it has on the front. So you could just switch it around and you could have two signs, but I'm just going to do the one that is on the front. And for that front sign, I did go and add some lights later on, and then I added lights for the deck of the trailer later on, just to help give it that night light. Everything I always make, it has a daytime life and then it has a night life. There's a totally different vision at night. I try to make a change in everything. Here it's actually rolling on the motors, spinning completely by itself. This was the very first time I got to sit back and enjoy seeing it go round and round. And it would actually go round and round on the two motors for, I believe, 6 hours straight, probably, on a 3.7 volt. See, we're getting into the part now where I got a bunch of the LEDs in it, and I kind of just skipped forward a little bit. Didn't show all of it assembled together there. But you can see all the wiring harness that came to the top, how they would connect together, and they got flashing lights and black lights and ultraviolet. Here's your commutator rings. So the positive will come up and connect, and then on the other side you would have the negative in the very same fashion. And then in the center of the wheel you'll have something that pushes out against those rings, or against those washers, which would be a metal wire, a piece of metal that would touch those to continue the continuity. But you can see on the other one there was a little cutout which allow you to get the wire tunnels. Here I'm sharing what I did is I soldered a little tiny, or it's actually about a 8mm 3mm 8x3mm bolt with a spring behind it, and it slides inside of a little spot. And it's actually recessed in there pretty far so that it can't move around a whole bunch. I think I designed that to use a standard, your common pen spring. Then what I actually had to do, I had a problem soldering to the washer. This is just the type of washers that I ended up finding. So what I did is I tapped it. I tapped it with a 3mm, a M3 tap, and then once it had threads, I filled it with solder. And filled it with solder while my wire was in there, and then it was pretty much just a bolt. So Then I ground it flat, made it to where it would be able to roll around it real nice. And I believe here I'm still tinkering with the commutator ring. Have to take the whole Ferris wheel off. Imagine doing this to a real one in real life, just walking around with it. It was kind of interesting holding that in your hands though, and yeah, I don't believe I actually had the negative hooked up yet at this point. That's why I was taking it apart, just kind of checking, and I assembled it to make sure that the positive was working. Pretty much most of the wiring comes together near the rear of the trailer and the operator cab, but it does have a wire tunnel that runs from the very front all the way to the back. That way you would be able to wire the brake lights and stuff like that to the truck, and you would be able to have that connector. It's taken me a little bit to set the Ferris wheel down safely. Now I'm about ready to start doing some of the wiring for the other side. It takes a little bit to get all the wiring up through the arch. And I'm actually doing the lights and the motors, and there's actually some lights for signs and stuff like that, or wires for the lights for the signs. But it takes a little bit to get it all up through there. You gotta test to make sure it's all got enough slack. That way when it folds down, it's not tugging on it all, and you end up having to go back in resoldering things. The washer actually fits in there really good. There's a certain size washer that you would end up needing for these here. But keep in mind, these here, I'm planning on selling these on eBay. They're listed now, but I do have a pretty high price for what I plan on in the overall to be selling them at. But at this point, I just can't come up with all the parts and everything to constantly be selling them at a quantity which I know they're going to sell at. So I'm trying to get a few different people to work with me on making these parts a lot more available and stuff. But until I can do that, it's kind of just me here printing and selling the things that I can. So it's going to be a slow process. But as I'm building it, I'm also working out little kinks that you run into, things you wouldn't actually find until you run into it right in front of you there. Changes, making those changes to the files on the PC as I go. Which, starting from day one, from what I had when I started printing the design, I really haven't had to make too many edits. It's a pretty good feeling when you can design something like this and get this far into it and everything just continues to fit together and work as you had hoped. It's a good feeling, and that's all I've learned. I mean, I learned a lot more than that. I learned I'm gonna check Ferris wheels when I go ride them first. Definitely learned what to look for. And I sat thinking for days on how I could build them commutator rings and getting the electricity to the center of the wheel. Just like the gondola lift, it took me a while to come up with the ideas and actually putting it down in design and making something that would be able to print out. But the overall, it actually is working out really good. And using the spring setup again, tensioned against the The washer, when the lights are actually on, it kind of flickers here and there. It kind of gives it a cool look instead of just having a constant power to the light. Once this trailer it's kind of an art piece. It's kind of it's a model, but I built it to be a showpiece. I used to always go to the meets, the tractor trailer meets and stuff like that, and once you get to the meet, you're just sitting there staring at your truck and you're showing people. But this trailer here, this will keep you going. This is going to give you a lot of things to continuously tinker with, and I could only imagine a crowd that is going to want to gather around this as they constantly see it grow and get bigger and bigger, and all the way up until the point that the lights turn on and it's assembled and starts spinning. I've actually had a lot of people reach out, a lot of people telling me that it's a really cool model, and so I just know it's going to be like my mini truck, turning more heads than a Ferrari. It's actually kind of interesting putting the wheel back in there. As you see I'm doing there, I actually have to line it up perfectly with the bearings and the outside A-arch frame, the holes that actually hold it all together. But at the same time, I gotta pull the drive motors away from the rim irons, because the drive motors are trying to hold the whole thing from the center, because the drive motors are supposed to be tensioned onto the wheel. So you kind of got to move all these different things at once to get it to set back into place. And I think probably altogether that wheel, there was probably 10 pounds in weight there. There's a lot there. You see, I just kind of set the drive motor back in the spot, made sure it was all tracking correctly there. You really don't know how well it's tracking until you start spinning it around. And even the spokes and stuff like that, they could be just slightly off. Sometimes you gotta just grab the whole wheel and just kind of shift it left and right and get it to line up. Once you got all the pins in it and everything, though, it's really stout. You could probably turn it over and skateboard on it. I guess you'd have to unicycle it. You can see I had to allow a bunch of slack for when it folds over, because those at the very tip right there, it actually shifts pretty good. It's not actually on the same axis of how it folds. It actually gets real tight right there, so I had to allow a little bit extra slack in the positive and negative wires. But other than that, I'm starting to wire all the LEDs together and connect them, get them all ran down to the main power wires that are hooked into the springs of the commutator rings. Yeah, it's pretty much just hooking the motors and all the lights and everything to a battery. At the point, I didn't have all the wiring 100% to the battery, because I wanted to wire them down to the operator cab and make a little box, a control box and stuff like that. So I just kind of hooked everything up and tested everything, made sure they worked just using the battery. And I think it's not too long. I show the lights and everything turning on there. Starting to look a lot better there. Yeah, so to say, if you're enjoying seeing the trailer and show any interest in having your own, it'll be available on eBay. If you follow me on eBay, See, and you could see the center, all the little connectors. I think there's like 35 little connectors. Who knows? Took me all day though to wire all the lights and everything throughout it. Yeah, I just sat down, took a whole day. Had a big old headache by the end of the night. But it's actually turning out really good. And there you can see the wire management and everything's gonna look really good for the final product. Here I'm kind of using that winch. So I'm pretty much getting towards the end of the assembly for the Ferris wheel. It pretty much got all of it fitted together. Maybe a little bit of work on the skirting, something like that. But for the main wheel, it's actually all assembled and rolling and everything. I'm just kind of showing the center spokes and everything, how they're all wired, and the lights that are in the center. I went with flashing lights that would project their illumination onto the gondolas and the umbrellas. You can see when it's fully set up, it's kind of, they're flashing onto them themselves. It just kind of gives it a little bit more light. This thing really is really fun to set up. I enjoy every bit of time that I spent doing this. And whether it's taking it down or putting it up or just seeing it sitting with my truck, it's always a joy. I would like to take it to a meet myself, but I just don't live close enough to any of them currently. During the end of the video, I do take it out somewhere and set it up, but I'm just trying to actually get some good videos and pictures for the listings and things like that. Yeah, soon you see I'm having some troubles with the winch line just dangling around right here. I get it stood up there, it kind of just falls. Doesn't really hold the spokes up where it's supposed to. The spokes kind of fold up around the gondolas. That way you don't really have to move none of it. A little bit of flash back there from the commutator rings. It could just be one side, either the negative losing it or positive losing it. That's a special light. Has that on everyone. Now that's just a theme that I chose. It could be so many different colors. The theme of it is what's gonna make it look totally different. The colors, I guess, that you would choose. So you can see I don't have the lights hooked up on the front sign yet. Even the cab illuminates a little bit, the yellow.
Yeah, those lights are actually sitting on the deck. The green actually pops out real good because of just the luminescence of the filament. I could have actually chosen a lot more different colors that would pop out to the UV lights, but I wasn't actually thinking about all that when I was doing the colors on the different baskets. It looks pretty good though. And I actually put lights facing down so that it would light up the deck and all that where you walk in and stuff. And I built a little control panel that sits on the deck. Has all the switches. And that's just a 3.7 volt turning that. And then a 7.2 volt powering all the lights. And I've actually ran all the lights and everything. I end up putting more on there, but I've ran the lights for a good hour. That's testing the Bluetooth stereo. Excuse me. The stereo stores away in the operator cab. And it's all Bluetooth to the phone so that you could just sit there and play whatever. I had it hooked up, and it was the loudest stereo in my house. There's the little control panel. So you got 4 switches. And 2 of them run the wheels, and then one of them runs the stereo, and the other one turns on lights. So you could either have all that in the operator cab, or you could have it sitting out on the deck of the trailer. And this is just testing it right now. It's not strung across the deck like that. This is when I was first putting it all together. And it's got a charge board that can tell the percentage of the batteries. Batteries and everything is inside the operator cab. Yeah, I just made my own battery. Those are I can't even remember anymore. I just purchased a bunch of batteries online. Things to tinker around with. 18650 batteries. I made it to where you could unhook everything. I actually have the stereo and everything playing in these videos, but I messed it up and deleted all the audio. But it actually plays and it sounds really good. All the electronic stuff stashed away in there. And it's got some lights and stuff that you can turn on in there, but extra ports out for USB and stuff. I ended up remaking the window so that it was just the window across the front, because you really don't need none of that. There isn't no use for a USB out the front. I mean, that's like the little server board. It's the brain of the ride. Yeah, I made it to where the stereo and the control panels could be put up into the operator cab. I've done a green light on the sign and a white light that shines down onto the deck. Finally get those there all hooked up. You can see the white light helped out a lot. All the ramps and everything, the stairs. The rails. Yeah, it's even got little stairs that help you get up into the gondola. Help you get up into the basket. Those there store away into the center too. They flip upside down and fall into one of the little center holes you see at the back. That's what one of them holes is for. The other is storage for pins. So the front hole that you see in the center of the trailer deck is for the pins that are common throughout the trailer, and then the second hole that is further back is for the stairs storeway. You can see I got them deck plates in here. Here's actually where that outing starts. I take it out to David Street Station. They can see I got a stage there. I decided I would set it up on that stage. Just wanted to get some really good pictures and stuff. And I don't have the brake lights and stuff hooked up at that point. But I'm setting it up, going through the steps. Yeah, I'm actually putting in a set of the rim irons, and then I would run the motors and just lift it up a little bit higher. It would force it backwards, counterclockwise, and lift it up higher and higher. See, I'm actually just using the tension of the drive motors, lifting it up and then using the tension to hold it sitting there. Pretty much do that for the whole process, and then continue putting the pins in around the rim irons and stuff. I cheated a little bit standing up. I was really actually just wanting to get pictures and stuff, so I wasn't too worried about using the gondola lift, the bottom jack and stuff like that. Plus there was people standing around wondering what I was doing. The owner of the whole place come up wondering how long I was going to be there. And then he said it was really cool. Just like going to a meet, you wouldn't really know what you had till you had it assembled. Yeah, it's gonna take a little bit to deal with all these gondolas. Over the past 10 years, I've put so much stuff on YouTube. There's a lot of cool stuff on my channel. If you like this here, you gotta check out the rest of it. Hardly got 2 views, but it's only me here doing it. I'm not very good at all the editing and stuff, but I build like crazy. And I try to video what I can. Yeah, I've pretty much got most of the gondolas on here. This is actually where I turn it on for the very first time there at the park. When you very first turn it on, you gotta just watch it and see how it goes around, make sure it doesn't start rubbing or anything. sometimes you gotta just slightly move it back and forth. But it turned out really good. Ended up getting some pretty cool pictures and videos. Yeah, that's about it. Hope you guys enjoyed seeing it. Just a little video montage of it all put together. Maybe it might help somebody in the future too when they're putting one together.